Welcome to Andy Staples on 3. At least that's the name for today. We might be changing it again. We don't know. We might sell the naming rights to this show. Who knows? Listen, there's always revenue streams out there. We are for sale here, people. You've seen us shill products on this thing. It's what we do. So, are we any different than the Big 12? I don't think so. Let's talk about that, because that was the headline on Thursday, even though it was maybe not the most interesting piece of Big 12 news on Thursday. The Big 12 may be selling its naming rights to Allstate. I know I'm in good hands when Pete Nakos comes on. So, Pete, we got to talk about this. There are many different ways to handle this. There are many different ways to do this, but let's just start with a couple of potential names. Like, if you're going to sell the name of the Big 12, you're going to call it the Allstate 12, the Allstate Conference, Conference Allstate, the Allstate League. What do we do?
I like, was it the Allstate Conference? I'm a fan of that one.
Allstate Conference. Yeah. Allstate 12, you can't do. They haven't had 12 schools since 2011. Like, that would be silly.
Yeah.
Like, the 12 means nothing.
Not a fan of that one. So I would be okay if they wanted to rebrand and just go like Allstate. Is it 16? Yeah.
Allstate 16 would be good. Like, yeah. I remember one of the few things that Larry Scott probably got right as the commissioner of the Pac-12. I remember sitting with him as they were going from the Pac-10 to the Pac-12, and he's like, "Of course we're going to change it to 12 because we have 12 schools now. Why wouldn't we do that?"
Yeah, and never even mind. We don't have to get into the Big Ten conversation. But anyways, so this Allstate news broke yesterday. Ross Dellinger first reported it. I confirmed it with some sources later on about Allstate being the leading candidate right now to land the title sponsor rights to the Big 12. And Andy, you and I have spent so much time on this show talking about how the TV revenue disparities when it comes to the Big Ten and the SEC against everyone else. Brett Yormark does not come from a college athletics background. He worked at the Barclays Center. He's really business thinking, forward thinking about how to get more revenue into the conference. He did his own thing this last year where he launched his own NFL combine. And now he's going to try to go get some naming rights for his conference, which could bring in, it sounds about $30 million to $50 million a year, give or take. And those dollars will trickle down to schools. And when there's such a need for money right now, when it comes to the television revenue disparity, I mean, it's a really, really smart idea.
Well, and so I do think this is a good idea. We got our jokes off yesterday, and I had people say, "Well, it looks like a poverty conference doing this." And what's 2 or 3 million per school? 2 or 3 million per school. I hate to say it and be simplistic about it like that. Is 2 or 3 million per school? Like, Pete, if I could get you $2 million extra dollars a year for something that isn't going to change your life very much, would you do it?
Yes.
And I mean, that's the thing. And I think people don't understand that. Like, these schools need to find ways to make this money. They are not the SEC or the Big Ten. They do not have these massive TV deals pumping money this way. They are about to have to spend millions more a year. Like, if they want to opt into the House versus the NCAA settlement and pay up to 21.6 million is the number right now. Yep. If they want to pay up to that, they are going to have to find ways to find that money. Now, they're going to have to cut it out of their budgets in some ways. They're going to have to add revenue streams in other ways. And so, like, here's my thing with the Big 12, with the name, the Big 12. This is not like The Wire, Marlo Stanfield, my name is my name. This is a name of a conference that, when you think of that conference and the history of that conference to this point, all you think of is chaos. You think of strife, of infighting. Like, when the conference was born, it was Nebraska against everybody. Then it was Texas against Texas A&M. Nebraska and Colorado leave. Texas A&M and Missouri leave. David Boren, the Oklahoma president, says they're psychologically disadvantaged. They said the one true champion advertising campaign, and then crown 2 football champions. That night ends with Bob Bowlesby on stage trying to hand a trophy to Art Briles, who is just yelling at him. Like, the Big 12 name does not have a great storied history in the world of college football. Like, it can go away and no one would care. Like, it wouldn't affect UCF or Iowa State, like the current members of the Big 12. So you can sell that. Like, would you sell the would you make it the Golden Flake SEC? No, of course you wouldn't. But in this case, the Allstate something or other might be the way to go.
Yeah, and we get back to this idea too of this television revenue. I mean, that has a lot to do with it. Beyond that too, Andy, you and I were talking about this before the show. These presidents are going to have to vote on it, just like you do with like a television rights deal. These presidents are going to want a very safe brand to sponsor their conference. Allstate makes a lot of sense. Yes, I was about to mention that, Willie Thomas. Yes, if they can't get Southwest Airlines to outbid them and name it the Southwest, I saw that on Twitter yesterday.
It was a guy named Landon put this thing on Twitter, and it's tremendous. He's got the Southwest logo and the Big 12 logo, and he's like, call it the Southwest Conference. It would be so good. Now, I do think like somebody probably still owns the Southwest Conference marks.
Probably.
I think.
Definitely.
But it would be tremendous if they could do that. I would absolutely love that. Ryan says it's disgusting. Is it though? But it's funny you mentioned that Brett Yormark used to work at the Barclays Center. Barclays, which used to sponsor the Premier League. Now, the Premier League in English soccer has not had a title sponsor, I think, for 8 years. But originally, it was the Barclays Premier League, and the bank Barclays paid them tons of money to have the name in front. Now, they don't do it anymore, probably because I don't think the companies that were putting their name in front got the bang for their buck because everybody just called it the Premier League. Now, this I think would be. You're not calling this the Big 12 presented by or some conference name.
Right.
Like, you're putting the name in it, just like when they made the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl the Chick-fil-A Bowl, so you would say Chick-fil-A. Like, that's what they're going to do. Now, it's funny. It's probably the wrong insurance company, because if you went nationwide, like the nationwide conference would actually be a fairly accurate descriptor.
Yeah, I like the idea of Aflac so we can get a mascot on the field.
And the synergies with Coach Prime would be tremendous. You've already got your number one pitch man working in the league.
Exactly. It'd be phenomenal.
So let's discuss why that particular piece of news was floated, because it was in a very organized way floated on Thursday.
It was.
It was a lot of sources. But there's a lot of people having their sources call them at the same time. And the other thing that was interesting about the Big 12 that was floated on Thursday, and this was a story that Dennis Dodd initially wrote. Oh, hold on. Willie's cooking. We're going to let Willie cook. How about the Good Hands Conference and hire all the air raid OCs to give out weekly bonuses for the highest scoring team each week? I like this.
That's good, Willie.
Listen, Willie is one of our best idea people. Like Willie has taken to asking Dear Andy questions pretty much every day in the email. And so we're just corresponding back and forth now. And then Nathan has one. The problem is what happens when the company stops supporting the conference. You need to change the name every 10 years like they do with pro stadiums. Yes, possibly. Like, that is a real possibility. That is something you do have to worry about. I think it. Now, I will say, given the shifting nature of the Big 12 throughout its history, that's probably not a bad thing. Like, maybe you need a refresh. But Pete, I was talking about this with somebody yesterday. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Like, we're weird about this stuff. We're weird about names, weird about that. Remember when Crypto.com bought the naming rights to the arena in Los Angeles that had a really cool name before? It was a Staples Center. Yeah. And remember when Acrisure bought the naming rights to the football stadium in Pittsburgh, which was named after a ketchup company? Like,
yes,
people got mad about that. How dare you not have an arena named after Andy Staples? I didn't get mad, but people got mad.
Tons of people.
Tens. There are tens of us. But like, seriously, the ketchup bottle, they forced them to keep the ketchup bottle on the stadium in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Because people were that attached to the freaking ketchup bottle. So like that, everybody's like, this is sacred. You can't change your name. You can't sell it. Listen,
you can't.
You'll get attached to whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really forward thinking. And as we transition, we're going to talk about private equity here in a minute. The idea of giving away the title sponsor of a conference makes a lot more sense to me than bringing in private equity and opening up to so many different things can happen in that situation.
Yeah, and that's the other piece of news that was floated. Dennis Dodd writes a column that basically the Big 12 is also exploring selling a 15 to 20% stake in the conference to a private equity firm in Luxembourg that would then give them a cash infusion of $800 million to $1 billion. But there's so many questions about that. I was talking to some people yesterday, and like one of the questions one of the people asked me, and I don't have an answer for this. I imagine Larry Scott has an answer for this because he actually explored this with the Pac-12 years ago. But the conference is a not-for-profit organization that essentially exists as a revenue pass-through. So the TV rights money, the bowl money, all that money, or the NCAA tournament money comes through the conference and is passed along to the school. So in the case of the Big 12, 16 schools, 13 of them are public schools. Like, can you sell a piece of that? Are you even allowed to sell a piece of that?
And yet again, we talk about this, and there are going to be a lot of hoops to jump through for this to happen. This is not going to be, yet again, presidents are going to have to sign off. I've talked to some sources, and I'm sure you have too. There are some presidents who are really held up about the idea of getting into private equity. And then it brings on this conversation: is it private equity where these firms get a piece of a school, or is it private capital, which is what former Florida State quarterback Drew Weatherford's doing with the Redstone firm? And they're saying that they want to put capital into an institution, and they don't want to own a piece of it, but they want to try to make their money back over a set period of time.
Hold on, and I say this as someone who covered Drew as a great high school quarterback at Land O'Lakes High in Pasco County, Florida. Right, like all of these people want to make their money back. They're not. Yeah, this is not a charity. Like none of this. Imagine getting $1 billion. And I was thinking about this because now if you buy a car, if you buy a house, the paperwork is such that they've made laws that the paperwork has to show you exactly how much you're paying with interest over the life of the loan. So if you buy a house for $300,000 and you finance like 80% of that, you'll see that you're paying probably depending on the interest rate, over $1 million by the time you've paid for 30 years. Like, what does that look like for $1 billion? Like, what is the expected return? How fast do they want it back? Like, I'm not sure that these people are ready for this.
What if the Big 12 doesn't exist in a decade? What if conference realignment comes when the Big 10 contracts are up with Fox and CBS and there's more conference realignment? Who's on the hook for that $1 billion?
These are great questions. These are all questions that have to be answered. And I will say the other thing, I don't think the athletic directors and the people who work in athletic departments are ready for is the style of management that comes in when you let private equity into your particular hen house. Because I say this as someone who worked at multiple newspapers, who's seen it happen. We've seen it happen in our industry up close and personal. Like, they do not care. They're not, like I said, it's not a charity. They are there to make money. And like I wrote this in a column yesterday, like most athletic departments are pretty bloated in terms of staff. Like, they're run like the neighborhood lemonade stand. That is not how these guys operate. They will slash, they will burn. You will not like it. It will be very unpleasant. And I think that it's interesting because that is what these people are trying to avoid by trying to get all this cash. They're trying to avoid having to downsize or right size or whatever you want to call it because they've got to pay all this money to players, they're going to have to cut from the athletic department budget. They're going to have to cut staff. They know that, and they don't want to do it. But the problem is, all you're doing is kicking the can down the road if you take this money now, because somebody's going to come in and tell you to do it after that.
Yeah. So I went to NACTA this week. I was there Tuesday in
Yeah.
Vegas and talked to some administrators, talked to some industry sources, and athletic directors right now are talking about the idea of like, okay, with revenue sharing, are we going to have to cut sports? That seems more of a threat at the moment than a reality, but it could be a reality in the next 12 to 18 months. If you bring private equity in, as Andy just outlined, they are going to boss around. They are going to tell you what to do. And there's probably a higher percentage that they tell you to cut sports than if you don't go into private equity.
Yeah, because they'll be like, which of these sports make money? And they'll be like, football and men's basketball. And they'll go cut everything else. And you'll go, well, no, we there's this thing called Title IX. And they'll go cut exactly what you need to comply with Title IX and have nothing more than that. Like, that's what they're going to say.
It's all about the bottom line.
Yeah.
It's all about the bottom line.
Yeah. So it is a pretty dangerous situation. It's a dangerous path to go down. And so this is because you know how my mind works, Pete. Anytime somebody floats stuff, I'm like, okay, what is the underlying reason for this happening now?
Yeah.
And the fact that both of these things were floated on the same day, my initial thought was, oh, they're trying to show this the shiny object, which is selling the conference naming rights to Allstate. And then they're going to okey doke with the private equity. And then I talked to somebody else who is much smarter than me and has been in the business a lot longer than me in college sports. And this person said, no, it's the other way around. The naming rights thing probably feels like sacrilege to all these presidents. But then when you put it next to the private equity thing, where you're basically selling a piece of yourself, and then you're going to let all these people come in and boss you around, that doesn't seem so bad for $3 million a year. So that made more sense to me when I thought about it that way.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And had some conversations. People think these conversations with Allstate are like they've been going on. This did not start on Monday, and then it got leaked on Thursday. So it will be interesting. And the other really interesting thing too, Andy, we don't have to dive into this too much, but Conference USA is also exploring this, I believe, with Global Health, it's called. Does every group of five conference get into this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, those schools are badly going to need if they can get another $1 or $2 a year. And a lot of them are grappling with the idea right now of, are they even going to revenue share? So don't be stunned if in the next year, the MAC, the CUSA, Sunbelt, all have title sponsors.
I'm thinking of the Sunbelt right now. Can we call it the Golden, would Golden Corral buy it? The ultimate football buffet. Come on. Tell me that doesn't work. There's got to be, I guarantee there's a Golden Corral in every Sunbelt town. Guarantee.
I can tell you there's a Tim Hortons all across the MAC.
That's true. Tim Hortons would be a great MAC sponsor. You know, everybody goes with Rotel. I think that they initially like that, but Tim Hortons is good. Culver's a little too Indiana based because the MAC's a little more Ohio and Michigan. Like
Ball State on-field sponsor though could be in play.
True. Yeah, we got the on-field logos, got the jersey logo. And here's what I said in my column about this, because I know everybody gets upset about this. I think you just go case by case. Like, there are certain schools and uniforms and fields where you should not sully them with branding. Like, Penn State's uniform needs to be Penn State's uniform, the way it looks. Auburn's uniform, Alabama's uniform. But look, if you're Oklahoma State, you have 30 different uniforms. And who cares? Like, have Pistol Pete holding a sign on your helmet. It doesn't matter.
I mean, Oregon's got it really easy. They just make the nice.
Yeah, but we already know what the brand is. Yeah. And by the way, all these other schools, including the Penn State uniform and the Alabama uniform, also advertising that brand.
Yes, very much so.
So Parlay Joe, Bucky's SEC. I mean, SEC is a Texas conference now because it's got A&M and Texas. Bucky's has expanded into Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, Georgia. Boy, what a blow to the Big 12 that would be.
I did see an SEC logo floated on social media last night made out of waffles, and that gave me a good laugh.
Yeah. Waffle House SEC would be tremendous. Somebody in the SEC texted me and said the old line, because I had said, Golden Flake, Texas Pete, those are the old line SEC sponsors. They sponsored the SEC for years and years, and they said they're just not big enough anymore. So, like, unfortunately, the SEC is and the SEC maybe past Waffle House. Like, the SEC is into Delta and Coca-Cola. Like, that's where the SEC is.